A secret property just became yours. The address will shock you. See the photo, don't skip, stay till the end. What you are about to hear begins like a whisper but grows into a revelation so unexpected that even you won't be able to explain the feeling that rises in your chest when the truth unfolds. It starts with a notification, one you almost ignored, an email that seemed ordinary, routine, unimportant, until your eyes caught the single line that made your heart stumble. Estate transfer confirmation. At first you thought it was a mistake, a scam, or some error in their system, but something in the back of your mind nudged you not to delete it. You clicked it, hesitantly, and what opened in front of you didn't just surprise you, it shook you. A property, fully registered, recently unlocked from decades of legal silence, had been placed under your name. No explanation. No warning. No family member calling ahead. Just your name printed boldly on a document that carried weight, age, and a history you had never been told. And beneath that notarized page was a photograph, grainy yet powerful, showing a place that felt both foreign and strangely familiar, as if a forgotten part of your story was staring back at you through the screen. That old building, with its silent windows and weathered exterior, looked like it had been waiting for someone, waiting for a moment, waiting for you. You leaned closer, noticing little details, the cracked stone archway, the iron gate slightly ajar, the long pathway leading to a door that seemed to whisper, "You should have come sooner." Questions crashed into your mind, but curiosity pushed louder. Who owned this before you? Why was it hidden? And why, of all people, did it surface now? This wasn't a random house. There was history in its walls, secrets in its shadows, and stories preserved in every inch of old wood and aging stone. Something about the address carved beneath the photo sent a shiver through you, not of fear, but of recognition. You had seen that name before. Not in your daily life, but somewhere deeper, in an old family conversation, a forgotten letter, a childhood memory you never understood. And now that address was tied to you, legally and without conditions, as if the past had reached forward and placed a key into your hands. You scrolled further, discovering that the property hadn't been touched for years because no rightful heir could be located. Records were lost, names were mismatched, and connections faded until, suddenly, a recent database update matched your lineage to the last registered owner. It felt like a movie unfolding in your living room. Your pulse started racing, not from fear but from the weight of something bigger than you, something that carried purpose. The more you read, the clearer it became that this wasn't just paperwork, it was a story, a forgotten chapter of your life resurfacing like a wave breaking after years of silence. And that photo, the longer you looked at it, the more you sensed something beneath the surface, something about that weathered house that felt alive with memory. It wasn't grand. It wasn't luxurious. It wasn't the kind of property people bragged about. Yet it held a presence, a gravity, like a place that had witnessed too much to ever be ordinary again. You imagined walking up to that old gate, hearing the creak of metal as it swung open, feeling the uneven stones beneath your feet. You imagined touching the walls, sensing the stories that lived there long before you arrived. This wasn't just an inheritance, it was a connection, a thread linking you to people you may have never met but whose lives shaped your own. And suddenly the question wasn't, why me, but rather, why now? Because timing matters. And nothing about this timing felt accidental. As you stared at the address, the meaning behind its appearance began to unfold. That place held answers. That place held something unfinished. That place held a message, one that had waited in silence until you were ready to hear it. Something in you knew that stepping into this inheritance wouldn't just change your surroundings. It would change your understanding of where you came from, who you are, and what lies ahead. You felt the weight of stories buried beneath dust, the kind of stories that shape legacies and carry truths that were once forgotten. And then it hit you, this photo wasn't simply proof of ownership. It was an invitation. An invitation to step into a space that had been preserved, protected, and hidden for reasons you were only beginning to grasp. An invitation to uncover what had been waiting in the quiet corners of a property that seemed to breathe with memory. An invitation to finally understand why destiny had circled back to this exact moment, this exact discovery, this exact address. Even if you don't yet know what this place holds, something in your spirit can already feel it. This is not the end of the story, this is only the beginning. And what comes next will explain everything. Don't skip, because what happens next takes this story far deeper than you expected, and if you miss even a second of it, you'll lose the clues that explain why this secret property was hidden from you for so many years. After the shock of discovering your name printed on the deed, you thought the story would start making sense, but instead everything around you began to feel heavier, like the universe was rearranging pieces you didn't even know were missing. The night after receiving the email, sleep refused to come. Every time you closed your eyes, the image of the property flashed behind your eyelids, the cracked stones, the dim windows, the iron gate left slightly open as if someone had slipped through just moments before the picture was taken. You felt it then, something about the property wasn't just connected to your past, it was connected to a part of your identity no one had ever told you about. By morning, curiosity had consumed you. You sat down and typed the mysterious address into every search engine you could think of, but the results were strangely empty, almost artificially empty. No listings, no photos, no real estate history, nothing except one nearly unreadable mention from decades ago, buried in an old scanned newspaper article. Your heart dropped when you saw a familiar last name linked to the property. A name you had heard your family mention only once, in a conversation that ended abruptly when you were a child, a conversation adults refused to explain afterward. Why would that name reappear now? And why was it tied to a place you had never visited but suddenly felt drawn to, like gravity itself was pulling you back toward it? Determined for answers, you emailed the agency whose signature appeared at the bottom of the legal document. You didn't expect a fast response, but within minutes your phone rang. The woman on the line sounded breathless, nervous, almost too eager to speak with you. When you confirmed your identity, she paused long enough to make your stomach twist. Then she said something you weren't prepared for, "We've been waiting for you to call." Her voice trembled slightly, like she was speaking a truth she'd been afraid to carry alone. You asked how the property could possibly be yours, and her explanation only made the mystery deeper. She told you the property had been locked in legal limbo for over 30 years, with ownership impossible to determine, because every public record related to it had gaps, names missing, dates mismatched, signatures incomplete, as though someone had intentionally tried to erase its history. Yet last month, during an archive transfer, her office discovered a single handwritten ledger tucked inside an old metal safe that no one even remembered existed. Inside that ledger was a family tree, a private one, never added to digital systems, and your name was written at the very end of the line, circled in red ink. According to the ledger, you were the final living heir, the only person legally connected to the last known owner. But what made your skin prickle was when she added, it was as if someone knew you would need to be found at the right time. Before you could ask more, the call glitched. The woman's voice turned static, cutting in and out, and then the line went dead, completely silent. You tried calling back, but the number that had just dialed your phone suddenly displayed, no longer in service. How could a functioning office line become disconnected seconds after ending a call? You checked the email again, and now even that source looked unstable. The sender's address didn't appear in your inbox anymore. It had vanished. Deleted. Gone. You felt a strange pressure behind your ribs, fear, anticipation, or maybe the feeling that something was unfolding far beyond your understanding. You opened the property photo again, zooming in much closer than before. That's when you noticed something you hadn't seen earlier. Inside the darkened window on the left side of the building, behind layers of dust and broken glass, was the faint outline of what looked like a figure. Not fully visible, not clear enough to identify, but undeniably there. Watching. Waiting. Motionless. Your pulse fluttered. Was it a shadow? A trick of the light? Or had someone been inside the property when the photo was taken? You zoomed further, but the image blurred as though the camera itself resisted being examined too closely. Something about that moment told you the property wasn't as abandoned as the documents claimed. And what unsettled you even more was the growing sense that this wasn't the first time your life had brushed against its history, you simply hadn't recognized it until now. Suddenly, you remembered a box tucked away in a storage closet in your childhood home, a box your family always avoided opening. You remembered hearing the adults whisper about an old house years ago, their voices low, urgent, almost fearful. You remembered a letter once slipped between pages of a book, yellowed, torn, signed by someone whose last name matched the record you found online. A letter that mentioned a place described only as, the one I could not leave behind. And now it was yours. Legally. Unexpectedly. Unavoidably. You felt a strange tug. Not fear, but a sense of responsibility, as though this property carried something meant for you to discover, something that had waited decades to come into your hands. You leaned back, staring at the photo, feeling the weight of what this inheritance truly meant. It wasn't money. It wasn't land. It wasn't a meaningless piece of real estate. It was the key to a story that had been hidden, protected, possibly even erased. A story tied to your blood, your legacy, your identity. And as you stared into that window, into that faint shadow, you knew deep in your bones, this was only the beginning. Don't skip this part, because what happens next changes everything, and if you miss even one detail, you won't understand the truth that's finally pushing its way into the open. After the shadow in the window, after the disconnected call, after the vanishing email, you found yourself sitting in complete silence, feeling the kind of stillness that doesn't come from peace but from something gathering itself around you, something waiting to be acknowledged. You tried to convince yourself you were imagining things, that the figure in the window was a trick of the light, a glitch in the photograph, a coincidence. But the more you replayed the moment in your mind, the more undeniable it became. Someone, or something, had been in that house when the picture was taken. And whoever it was, they were not meant to be seen. Your thoughts spiraled into 1,000 questions, each heavier than the last. Why was this property locked away for decades? Who erased its records? Why did the phone call cut off at the exact moment the woman began revealing the truth? And most importantly, why did the ledger, untouched for years, lead directly to you? You stared at the photograph once again, zooming in beyond clarity, your eyes searching for anything you might have missed earlier. The vines covering the front entrance seemed to twist strangely, almost forming shapes you hadn't noticed before. The brickwork beneath them showed chipped patterns that felt less like time and more like symbols, carvings deliberately cut into stone. And there, near the bottom edge of the frame, half covered in shadow, was a shape, rectangular, metallic, like a small old-fashioned plaque, but the picture quality blurred its writing, leaving only an impression of engraved letters you couldn't decipher. A sudden wave of uneasiness rose inside you, not fear exactly, but a realization that the property wasn't just old, it was layered. Like a story written, erased, rewritten, then buried under silence. Determined to understand more, you dug deeper. You searched through old emails, archived family documents, anything that might connect you to this mysterious estate. At the back of a storage drawer, behind piles of unrelated papers, you found something you didn't remember ever seeing before. A sealed envelope with no stamp, no date, and no return address. Only your name handwritten across the front in ink so faded it looked decades old. Your fingers trembled as you opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, yellowed at the edges, containing just one sentence: "When the house finds you, don't go alone." Underneath the sentence, a symbol was drawn in dark ink, a circle intersected by 3 straight lines, forming a shape you didn't recognize. The same shape suddenly felt familiar, as if you had seen it carved somewhere before. Your chest tightened. The plaque in the photo, the blurred shape beneath the shadow, it had the same symbol. Someone had placed this warning in your home long before you ever knew the property existed, long before you were old enough to understand what it meant. Your thoughts raced. How long had your family known? Why didn't they tell you? And why was the warning delivered in silence instead of explanation? You needed answers, and every instinct you had told you they weren't going to appear online or in records, they were going to be found at the house itself. But the message echoed in your mind: don't go alone. You texted a close friend, someone you trusted with the things you didn't share with anyone else. You didn't explain much, just said you needed company for something important. They agreed without hesitation. The following day, you both drove toward the property, the address glowing on your GPS like coordinates leading to a hidden chapter of your life. The closer you got, the quieter everything felt. Even the air seemed heavier, the sky dimmer, the road narrower. Your friend tried making small talk, but the weight of what you were approaching lingered in every breath. As the house came into view, your heart stuttered. It looked exactly like the photo, maybe worse. The stones were darker in person, the windows clouded with years of dust, the gate rusted but still slightly open, as though frozen mid-motion. The vines crawling up its walls seemed almost alive, shifting subtly with the breeze, clinging tightly to corners as if guarding the house. Your friend whispered, "Are you sure we're allowed to be here?" You didn't answer. You couldn't. Something about the property felt both threatening and familiar, like approaching a place you once dreamed about but never fully understood. You stepped through the gate, the metal groaning softly under your touch. The sound echoed across the empty yard, making it feel like the house itself was responding to your arrival. As you walked up the path, your eyes caught movement inside, just a flicker, like someone shifting behind the curtain. Your friend stopped. "Did you see that?" they whispered. You nodded slowly. Something was inside. Or someone. But the closer you moved toward the front door, the stronger the sensation grew that whatever waited inside wasn't a stranger. It didn't feel hostile. It felt expectant. As though the house had been holding its breath for years, waiting for someone with your name, your bloodline, your piece of the story to finally return. When you reached the door, you noticed another symbol scratched faintly into the wood, the same symbol from the envelope. Your pulse hammered in your ears. Whoever sent that message knew this moment was coming long before you did. Your hand hovered over the doorknob, the air thick with mystery, anticipation, and the undeniable truth that stepping inside meant uncovering everything, every secret, every connection, every reason this house found its way back to you. And in that suspended second, just inches from opening the door, you realized something. You were no longer afraid. You were ready. Don't skip this part, because the moment you step inside, the truth begins to reveal itself in ways you never imagined, and what happens next will explain every shadow, every unanswered question, every strange coincidence that has followed you since the day the property found you. Your fingers tightened around the cold doorknob as you hesitated, your friend breathing quietly beside you, both of you caught between fear and certainty. The air around the house felt charged, almost electric, like the walls themselves remembered footsteps from years long gone. With one steady breath, you pushed the door open. It groaned loudly, echoing through the silence like a forgotten voice awakening after decades of sleep. Dust swirled in the air, catching soft slivers of light that broke through cracked windows, and for a moment, the entire space felt suspended. Caught between past and present, waiting for your arrival to complete something unfinished. The smell of old wood, damp stone, and time hit you, but under it was something else, something faint yet familiar, like the scent of a place you had visited once in a dream. As you stepped inside, the temperature dropped slightly, not enough to frighten you, but enough to signal that this house was not like any other you had entered before. Your footsteps echoed across the wooden floors, each creak sounding like a whispered acknowledgement, a soft welcome from a place that had waited far too long. Your friends stayed close, their unease obvious, but you felt strangely calm, almost guided, as though invisible threads were leading you deeper into the shadows. The interior was nothing like the outside suggested. Instead of complete decay, there were signs of careful preservation. Walls free of graffiti, furniture still intact, and a faint trace of warmth clinging to certain corners. It was as if someone had been here recently, tending to the place in secret, protecting it from the world. You moved through the front room, noticing the faint shape of the strange symbol carved lightly into a wooden beam above your head. The same circle with intersecting lines. The symbol from the envelope. The symbol from the plaque. You reached out, tracing it gently. The wood felt unexpectedly warm beneath your fingertips. Your friend whispered, "Why is that symbol everywhere?" You didn't have an answer. Not yet. But with each new place you saw it, the truth grew clearer. Someone had marked this house intentionally, deliberately, leaving signs only meant for the person who would eventually return. You walked further in, feeling drawn toward a long hallway shrouded in dim light. At the far end was a closed door, its edges lined with carvings. Not random scratches, but patterns that looked eerily similar to those you saw on old artifacts or ancient seals. As you approached, the floor beneath you creaked again, but this time it wasn't just the sound, it was a vibration, faint but distinct, like a heartbeat pulsing beneath the boards. You exchanged a tense glance with your friend. Something behind that door mattered. Something behind that door had been waiting. You reached for the handle, but before you could turn it, another sound broke the silence. Upstairs. Slow. Measured. Footsteps. Your friend froze. "Someone's here," they whispered. But you didn't feel fear, not the way you should have. The footsteps didn't sound threatening. They sounded familiar. Steady, almost rhythmic, like someone walking with purpose. You stepped away from the door, your eyes lifting toward the staircase just around the corner. The old wooden steps were dark, covered in dust, yet the topmost one bore a clear footprint, a fresh one. Someone had been walking here recently. Someone was possibly still inside. But why? And why did it feel like whoever it was had been waiting for you specifically? You climbed the stairs slowly, each step groaning beneath your weight. With every movement upward, the feeling of familiarity intensified, spreading through your chest like an old memory trying to surface. At the top, the hallway stretched left and right, dim and silent. Then, to your right, a door slowly creaked open on its own, as if beckoning. Your friend grabbed your arm. "We should leave," they whispered urgently. But something in you knew there was no turning back. Not now. Not after you had come this far. You stepped toward the open door, heart pounding but steady. Inside the room was a desk covered in dust, except for one strange thing. A journal, clean, untouched, perfectly centered, as if placed there moments before you arrived. The moment your eyes landed on it, your breath caught. The handwriting on the front cover, the looping letters, the signature, was one you recognized instantly. It belonged to someone from your childhood. Someone you thought you had forgotten. Someone you were told had disappeared long ago. Someone your family refused to talk about no matter how many times you asked, your grandfather. A man whose name had always carried a faint whisper of mystery, whose belongings had vanished after his sudden disappearance, and whose story, according to your family, was too complicated to explain. Your hands shook as you touched the journal, and the moment your fingertips grazed the cover, a sudden memory exploded in your mind. You, as a child, sitting on his lap while he sketched a symbol in a notebook, the same symbol now carved all over this house. You hadn't remembered it until now. You opened the journal slowly. Inside the first page was a message written in your grandfather's handwriting. "If you are reading this, then the house has finally found the right heir. You must listen carefully, nothing about this place is what it appears to be." Your heart pounded so hard you felt it in your throat. Beside you, your friend whispered, "What does it mean?" You swallowed hard, turning to the next page. And what you saw written there made your entire body go still. It was your name. Written over and over and over again, in ink that looked decades old. As if your grandfather had known you would return. As if he had been waiting for this moment long before you were even old enough to understand what destiny really meant. Don't skip this part, because what you're about to hear from inside that journal will change everything you thought you knew about your family, your past, and why this house refused to belong to anyone but you. Your eyes stayed fixed on your name written again and again in your grandfather's handwriting, each repetition feeling less like ink on paper and more like a thread pulling you deeper into a story he knew you'd one day have to finish. Your friend stood beside you in stunned silence, their gaze flicking between your face and the journal, as if trying to understand what kind of secret you had just uncovered. Your fingers trembled as you turned the page, half afraid, half desperate to know what came next. The next entry was dated decades before you were even born. To the one who bears my blood and my name in the future, it began, I am writing this because I know they will try to erase every trace of this house, every record of what happened here, and every clue that might lead you back. But some places are bound to us by more than paper and law. This house is one of them. You swallowed hard, your pulse pounding in your ears. He went on to explain that the property had once been the center of your family's life. Gatherings, celebrations, conversations that stretched late into the night. It wasn't just a building, it was the foundation of a legacy. But something changed. Your grandfather wrote of a conflict nobody outside the family knew about, a bitter struggle over inheritance, over responsibility, over the burden of what this land carried. Some relatives wanted to sell it, others wanted to abandon it, believing it cursed with misfortune after a series of unexplained tragedies. But your grandfather felt differently. This house is not cursed, he wrote. It is guarded. It holds truths that frightened them because they could not control what those truths meant. Your friend shifted uneasily beside you, but you couldn't stop reading. Entry after entry detailed how certain family members tried to detach themselves from the property, hiding its existence, paying lawyers to bury its records, closing it up and walking away as if pretending it never existed would erase whatever lingered here. Your grandfather, however, didn't walk away. He chose to stay connected, visiting in secret, maintaining what he could, leaving markings of the strange symbol as a thread for the future to follow. The same symbol that had appeared in your childhood memory, the same one carved into the beams and doorways around you now. Then you reached an entry that made your chest tighten. They will tell you I disappeared, he wrote, that I left without explanation, that I abandoned my responsibilities. That is the story they will give you because it is easier to call me absent than to admit I stayed to guard what they were too afraid to face. I did not disappear. I hid. For you. Your hands shook harder. All those years your family grew quiet whenever his name came up, all the times they dodged your questions about him, all the half-finished sentences, it all started to make sense. They weren't just avoiding grief, they were avoiding the story attached to this place. The next lines cut even deeper. I knew I wouldn't be the one to finish this. The house chose differently. It needed someone untouched by the choices they made, someone who would come looking for truth, not escape. That is why I wrote your name before I knew your face. I knew you were coming. You read the sentence again, as if the meaning might change, but it only sank further into you. Your friend whispered, he wrote all of this before he even knew you. You nodded slowly, feeling a strange blend of awe and responsibility settle over you. This wasn't just an old journal. It was a map, a confession, and a passing of the torch all at once. You turned the page and found a rough sketch of the house's floor plan. Certain rooms were circled, others crossed out. One room in particular, located on the ground floor near the back of the house, was marked with the familiar symbol and a note beside it, the heart of it all. Do not open this room until you are ready to know everything. You immediately pictured the long hallway and that closed door you'd almost entered before hearing the footsteps upstairs. You could feel it now, that room pulling at the edges of your awareness, waiting. Your grandfather continued, by the time you find this, the house will have called you. You will notice things others do not, shadows that look back at you, patterns in the walls, silence that feels heavy instead of empty. Do not fear it. The house remembers. It has seen what was done, what was taken, what was hidden. It has kept its secrets because it was waiting for the right person to carry them forward instead of burying them again. As you read those words, you realized something. All the glitches, the vanished email, the disconnected phone line, the missing records, they weren't signs telling you to walk away. They were proof that someone, or something, had been trying to keep the truth from ever reaching you. But the house itself had refused to cooperate. It let the ledger be found. It let the email slip through. It let that photo be taken. It let your name be matched. The timing was too precise to ignore. Your friend leaned closer, pointing to another line further down the page. If you came here alone, leave now and return with someone you trust. This place is heavy with memory, and memory can swallow you whole if you confront it without another voice present. You exhaled shakily. Without even knowing it, you had followed his instructions. You hadn't come alone. For a brief moment, a warm feeling, almost like being protected, washed through you. Your grandfather might have been gone, but in a very real way, he was here, guiding every step you took. At the end of that entry, one final sentence was written, underlined 3 times. When you are ready, go to the room with the mark. What you find there will explain why they tried so hard to keep you away. From this house, from this truth, from the part of yourself that lives here. You close the journal gently, your mind racing, your heart pounding with a mix of dread and determination. Your friend watched you, waiting for you to speak, but words felt too small for what you had just taken in. Finally, you lifted your gaze and said quietly, "We have to go to that room." Outside the window, the light had shifted. Shadows lengthened along the walls, stretching like memories waking up. The house seemed to hold its breath, aware of the choice you were about to make. And deep inside, where fear and curiosity collided, you knew there was no going back to life as it had been before. The only way now was through. Don't skip, because what happens the moment you approach that marked room will reveal why the house waited for you, and why someone in your family tried so desperately to keep you away from the truth that lived behind that door. Your pulse hammered through your chest as you and your friend slowly descended the stairs, each step echoing through the house like a countdown to a revelation you weren't sure you were ready to face. The hallway was darker now, shadows stretching longer across the floor, as if the house itself sensed you were approaching the part of its story that had been sealed for decades. But there was no fear in you, only a strange, tightening sense of inevitability. The journal felt heavy in your hand, your grandfather's words circling in your mind like a compass pointing you toward the center of everything. Your friend walked slightly behind you, flashlight trembling in their grip as the two of you moved toward the closed door at the end of the hall, the same door lined with those faint carvings you had noticed earlier, the same door that seemed to vibrate faintly when you approached it the first time. Now, as you stood before it again, the air felt thicker, charged with something unspoken. Every symbol scratched into the wood glimmered subtly under the dim light, as though it recognized you, as though it had been waiting for the touch of someone who carried the same blood as the man who carved those markings long before you were born. You reached out, but before your hand touched the door, your friend grabbed your wrist. "Are you sure you want to open it?" they whispered, voice barely steady. You hesitated, not because you doubted the decision, but because approaching the truth felt like stepping into a memory that didn't belong to you yet somehow lived inside you. "We need to," you said softly. "Whatever is behind this door, he wanted me to see it." You turned the knob. It wouldn't move. Locked. But the lock wasn't a modern one, it felt ancient, handcrafted, the type that wasn't meant to be opened by everyone. You took a slow breath and pressed your palm against the wood. The symbol under your hand warmed instantly, as if reacting to you. And then, click. The lock gave way on its own. Your friend jumped back. You stared at the door, breath caught, waiting for something else to happen. But nothing did. The door was simply unlocked. You pushed it open. The hinges groaned like a warning and a welcome at the same time. Inside the room, dust particles drifted through a thin beam of light that streamed in from a small round window near the ceiling. The room was empty, or so it seemed at first. The walls, however, told a different story. Every inch of them was covered in writings, sketches, dates, symbols, the same circle intersected by lines, repeated over and over again, but each drawn slightly different, as though documenting a long process of trial and error. Names were written in neat rows, including some you recognized from family gatherings and others you had never heard in your life. Many names were crossed out. Only one remained untouched, yours. You stepped inside, compelled by something you couldn't explain. The air in the room felt old, preserved, almost sacred. Your footsteps softened, like the floorboards beneath you didn't want to disturb the silence. You moved toward the far wall where an empty frame hung crookedly, as if something had once been inside but had been removed with urgency. Beneath the frame was a wooden chest, locked with the same symbol carved across the latch. Your friend whispered, "This looks like some kind of family vault." You knelt beside it, tracing the carved lines with your fingertips, feeling the grooves your grandfather's hands had once made. The moment your fingers completed the symbol, the latch clicked open. You froze. Your friend took a step back. The chest creaked loudly as you lifted the lid. Inside were stacks of old letters bound with red string, a small silver key, a faded photograph of the property in its prime, and a final journal identical to the one upstairs. But this journal had your name on the cover. You lifted it slowly, heart pounding with a mixture of dread and awe. The letters inside the chest were addressed to you, dated years before you were even born. Most were sealed. One was open. You unfolded it gently. "My successor," it began, "when you read this, the house has accepted you. This place holds what our family feared, what they ran from, and what they could not understand. But you will. Because the truth belongs to those who seek it, not those who hide from it." Your eyes blurred with emotion. You turned the page. Inside this room is the memory of everything they tried to erase. They feared what the house revealed. But you must not. Because the house only shows what you are strong enough to handle. You looked up at the walls, noticing something new: lines connecting symbols, arrows pointing to dates, circles around events that predated even your grandparents. A timeline of secrets. A legacy of silence. Then your friend whispered sharply, "Look." You followed their gaze to the far corner of the room where a small wooden panel seemed slightly detached from the wall, as though someone had pried it open once long ago. You approached it slowly, your pulse thrumming in your ears. You slipped your fingers into the thin gap and pulled. The panel loosened, falls to the floor with a soft thud, revealing a small hidden compartment. Inside was a single item, a folded document sealed with wax bearing the symbol you'd seen everywhere. You lifted it carefully. It crackled in your hands. You broke the seal. And when you opened the document, your entire world shifted. The truth written inside wasn't just a clue. It wasn't just a family secret. It was something much bigger, something that explained the disappearances, the silence, the erased records, the hidden ledger, and why the house had waited decades for you. The words burned into your mind, reshaping everything you thought you knew about your family. And as you read the last line, a sudden sound echoed behind you: footsteps. Not yours. Not your friends. Slow. Deliberate. Coming closer. You turned toward the doorway, heart racing, knowing that whatever waited there was connected to the final revelation you had just uncovered. Don't skip this final part, because what happens in these next moments will tie every thread together and reveal why this house chose you, why your grandfather disappeared, and why the truth could never reach anyone else but you. You froze as the footsteps grew closer, the slow, deliberate rhythm echoing against the hallway outside the marked room, and your friend tightened their grip on your shoulder as the air thickened, charged with a pressure that felt both familiar and heavy, like the presence of someone who had been missing for a very long time. The document in your hands trembled slightly as you reread the final line, the one that shattered everything you thought you knew about your family. The person who enters this house and opens this room will inherit not just the property, but the responsibility I carried, because the truth that destroyed our family can only be restored by the one who finishes what I began. Your breath hitched, and before you could even process the meaning of those words, the footsteps stopped just outside the door. A shadow stretched across the threshold, long and unmistakably human. You and your friend exchanged a quick, breathless glance, the room holding its breath with you. Then, slowly, the figure stepped into view. Your heart almost stopped. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't an intruder. It wasn't anyone you feared. It was a man in his late 60s, eyes sharp but tired, familiar in a way that made your entire body go numb. The jawline, the posture, the calm intensity, you had only seen them in old, faded photographs buried deep in family albums. Your friend whispered your grandfather's name under their breath, stunned. The man standing before you was older now, worn by years and shadows, but unmistakably him. He didn't smile. He didn't speak at first. He simply watched you with the kind of expression only someone who has waited an entire lifetime for a single moment could wear. You stepped forward, emotion choking your voice. You didn't disappear. His eyes glimmered. No, he said softly. I stayed where the truth stayed. Your friend, breath shaky, whispered, but everyone thought, they thought what they needed to think, he replied, eyes still on you. It was safer that way. You searched his face, trying to reconcile this living, breathing reality with the ghost you had believed him to be. Why, you finally asked. Why hide? Why stay in this house all these years? He stepped inside the room, looking around at the carvings, the symbols, the timeline on the walls, his work, his warnings, his legacy. Because someone had to protect the truth, he said quietly. Someone had to make sure it didn't fall into the hands of those who wanted it buried forever. He gestured toward the document you held. Did you read it? You nodded, though your mind still struggled with its weight. The document revealed what the family had hidden, an old dispute that had torn them apart, not about money or land, but about responsibility. The property sat on land that once belonged to your ancestors, who built a refuge here generations ago, a place meant to protect people fleeing danger during a time of community conflict. Over the years, your family splintered, some wanting to keep the house's purpose alive, others wanting to sell the land and erase the past out of fear or greed. Your grandfather was the last one who chose to honor its true purpose. But when others turned against him, threatening to expose secrets that didn't belong to them, he withdrew, recording everything inside these walls and waiting for someone who carried both his blood and his integrity to return. You were the only one I trusted to finish what I couldn't, he said, voice steady but emotional. I knew it even before you were born. You swallowed hard, feeling the weight of something larger than yourself shift onto your shoulders. Not a burden, but an inheritance of truth, of history, of healing. But why me, you asked? Why not my parents, or anyone else? He stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on your shoulder. Because everyone before you walked away. They feared the responsibility this house carried. But you, his voice softened. You came back. A silence fell over the room, heavy but warm, like a long chapter finally closing. Your friend whispered, so what happens now? Your grandfather looked around the room, his eyes lingering on the symbols, the timeline, the letters, the history this house had protected. Now, he said, you decide what this house becomes next. He explained that the property was no longer a place of hiding. The disputes that once tore the family apart were gone, those responsible either passed on or distanced themselves long ago. The land was now yours, free and clear, not because of a legal glitch, not because of luck, but because destiny threaded its way back to you through every obstacle. The house doesn't need guarding anymore, your grandfather said. It needs living. It needs purpose again. It needs you to give it a future. You felt a warmth swell inside your chest, a sense of clarity washing through you like light filling a long-shuttered room. The fear faded. The confusion dissolved. The house didn't want to trap you. It wanted to restore you. Restore your family's broken story. Restore the legacy abandoned by generations. Restore the truth your grandfather protected alone for far too long. You turned to him, your voice trembling. So this house, this property, was never cursed? He smiled gently. No. It was waiting. Your friend exhaled in relief. You felt your shoulders relax as a weight you didn't realize you carried finally lifted. The house around you felt different now, no longer heavy with secrecy, but alive, awake, free. Your grandfather gestured toward the door. Come, he said softly. Let me show you the rest. You stepped out of the room, leaving the shadows behind as light spilled across the hallway. In that moment, you understood the truth completely. The property wasn't just yours by law. It was yours by purpose. And for the first time since you discovered that email, you felt it fully.